Hey everyone. So at about 6:30 p.m. my power went out. It's now about 3:40 a.m. and I'm gonna be posting this video at a weird time, but I'm still just gonna go ahead and post it. I hope you all enjoyed the stories, and I'm sorry it's a bit shorter than usual, but it's still a video. Anyways, I hope you like the stories, and remember to always stay hungry. This happened a couple of years ago when I was still pretty young, probably around the age of 10. I live close to a gas station in a pretty urban part of town, and so I relatively often walked up there to grab myself some snacks and whatnot. On this specific day, I'd gone up to grab myself a drink for lunch. My brother, who was home with me, decided to stay. The way that I walked was in the back streets of our suburb. There's a dead-end street with a connecting footpath that's not visible from the road that I was able to access as a shortcut. And there's almost never any cars or people on the dead-end road. It's a quiet back street. I walked up with no issue, grabbed my drink, and began to walk home. I was almost home walking down the dead-end street to the connecting footpath when I saw a man walking his dog about 100 feet in front of me. I took no notice until he got to the end of the footpath and his dog stopped to sniff around. That's when he turned around and saw me and stopped still. His dog stopped too. They both watched me walk the 100 feet towards them. Keep in mind, this path isn't visible from the road which I lived on, and the dead-end road is barely ever used, so I was completely alone. This man stood and watched me without moving or breaking eye contact for about 5 minutes while I slowly walked down the street. I was totally freaked out. So in an act of genius for 10-year-old me, I called my mom on the phone and I began to babble to her about nonsense as the man was now in earshot. I was just telling her where I was, knowing she'd be able to know if anything happened, and she then comforted me a little. The man creepily stared at me as I walked up to him, and I had to push past him to get to my house. Unfortunately, my house was really close to the footpath, so he followed me home. I went inside, and I bashed on the door for my brother to let me in. When he did, I went inside, and I very discreetly peeked out of the front window. The man was still there with his dog, watching the house. He stayed there for what felt like hours, but was probably only around 10 minutes. Since then, he's begun walking around the house a lot more. I've seen him a couple of times. Every time he sees me, he stops and stares at me. And yeah, it creeps me the fuck out every time. This took place in February of 2023. I'm a 23-year-old college student, and I'm a female. On this particular day, I needed to stop and get gas. I really wanted an energy drink, so I went inside not only for that, but because I was paying in cash. Usually I just bring enough cash with me to pay for my gas and whatever I'm getting, so I grabbed like $50. Well, as I'm walking inside the gas station, there was a guy behind me who I had held the door open for, just because, you know, that's the normal general respect thing you do for someone, right? He responds to me doing so by thanking me profusely. I just told him no problem, and didn't really think too much about it, continuing about my day and getting my energy drink like I had originally intended. I also grabbed a snack. The guy that I held the door for also happened to be in the snacks area. No big deal. Well, shortly after, we both ended up in line with the guy behind me. Now, I'm always very aware of my surroundings, and I noticed that when he got in line, he didn't have anything in his hands, which I thought was kind of strange. But hey, maybe he just didn't find anything he liked there. Well, after I get done checking out, I hear him say that he wants to get gas and pay with his card. So that did ease my mind a little, and it made sense. Now to this next part of the story, it's gonna make me seem really naive. The thing is, I always try my absolute best to truly see the good things in people. You know, see the best, if you will. That's just who I am. And I don't always recognize the bad in people. I used to always get yelled at for giving people on the side of the road money because they could possibly be scammers. But the way I look at it is I'm not giving these people $100. I'm giving them like 20 at most. And if I bought some stranger some lunch for the day, then whatever. I don't really care. And at the end of the day, I know regardless I'm doing the right thing. And if they're spending it on something else, that's on them. So anyways, this guy starts making small talk with me. And he then looks at me and says, "Do you think they'll let me put $10 on my gas pump and then come back later and pay it? I just realized that my son has my wallet and I'm completely out of gas." I reply back to him with, "Honestly, I don't think they'll let you do that. But all you need is $10, right?" "Yeah, only 10, he replied. I told him that I could give him the $10 just to help him out. This is just who I am. "Are you sure? How am I supposed to pay you back?" he asked. I just told him he didn't have to worry about it. It's fine. I then asked him what pump he was at so I could pay for his gas. He told me, and I told the cashier that I wanted to put $10 on his pump, and then another transaction as well to buy my items, and to also put the rest of the money on my pump, which is like 30. Well, when the guy walked out, the cashier lady checking me out had asked me, "Young lady, I'm not trying to get into your business, but do you even know that man?" I told her no, but that I was just trying to help someone out who's having a rough go at it. Well, she replied back telling me that he was just in here the day before asking others for money, just like he did to me. I didn't really care though. I replied back to her, "Oh well, I guess it is what it is. I guess he got me this time." She asked me if I wanted to cancel the $10 on his gas and to get my money back. But I just went ahead and went through with it because he's already left the building, and I'm not trying to start a big confrontation. Plus, I mean, it really is only $10. I don't really care that much about it. All while this is happening, there's another guy online telling me I should get my money back, and all this bullshit, and that people like this are what makes this country so bad. And he went on a whole tangent that I honestly just want to block out. I mean, I just wanted to pay for my things, get gas, and get the fuck out of there. Plus, I still have the hour-and-a-half drive that I have to do from my school. So that's what I did. I paid for my things and walked out, with the cashier lady then following me out, for safety reasons, I guess. I get to my car and I start pumping my gas, just so ready to get the hell out of there and get on the road. But as I was pumping my gas, I watched as the cashier lady walked up to the guy who had just scammed me out of the $10. I couldn't really make out what she was saying to him, but it didn't look good. The guy now seemed really irritated, then focusing all of his attention towards me, looking directly at me. "Oh, fuck," I muttered to myself. I don't really know why he would look at me like that. I mean, it's not like I was the one yelling at him, and it's not like I even asked for my money back. Plus, he already pumped the gas at this point. Well, he continued looking at me, yelling out loud, "Hey, thanks again for the gas." Which, I'm not gonna lie, I thought was kinda weird after just looking at me with so much disgust. But I just replied back with, "Yeah, no problem, man," before then getting in my car and driving off. I'm not even kidding. Immediately when I got to the light, I saw the guy's car now behind me. I could tell it was his car because he was in a bright red Toyota and he had absolutely no tint on his windows, so I was able to see him. I didn't want to panic, and I tried to really not think anything of it. That is until I started driving, and he was still behind me. I tried to just assume that maybe he was just going in the same direction I was. But then, I got into the highway. This is when things went from bizarre to just outright creepy. I started getting seriously nervous and paranoid because he was staying in the same exact lane that I was, and he wasn't switching lanes at all. My first thought was that he was following me, but I kept trying to think logically, telling myself that I'm just being paranoid and that he's probably just going in the same way that I was. But either way, I have an hour and a half to drive, so if he really wants to follow me, he's gonna have one hell of a trip on his hands. So I told myself I was gonna wait about 20 minutes before I truly allow myself to actually get worried. Well, that's exactly what happened. I waited about 20 minutes, and he was still behind me. Fuck. Alright, this isn't just me being paranoid anymore. This guy is definitely up to something. I decided to act like I was going to take an exit to test if he was actually following me, or if it really was just a big-ass coincidence. I acted like I was taking the nearest exit, turning on my turn signal. I got into the exit lane, and then quickly shifted out of the exit, and immediately, he did the exact same thing, fully confirming that he was indeed following me. At this point, I was now beating myself up for even being nice to somebody, because I've now potentially put myself in a lot of danger. I was nervous, and I was consumed with more anxiety than I've ever had in my life. I also still had such a far drive. I was hoping that maybe he would just give up because it's literally an hour and a half of a drive. I also got annoyed at the cashier because I literally told her that I didn't want a confrontation, but she proceeded to walk up to him when I was still on the property, which is honestly what I think made him follow me. But I also don't want to place all the blame on her. Let's be real, he probably was just a creep or something regardless. Anyways, so he continues to literally follow me for over an hour at this point. I began telling myself in my head that I was going to go to the nearest police station and not lead him anywhere near where I live. So I was looking at my phone for the nearest police station when he pulls up right next to me and is telling me to roll down my window. I shook my head no, and he just got behind me again. He did this for a few times, and at that point I was getting kind of nervous because I didn't know if he had a weapon or anything on him. And since we're still on the highway, I know that there's patrol cars that sit on the side of the road watching for speeders all the time, but I hadn't seen one yet. But during my morning drive from earlier, I saw at least two at the point where I hadn't passed yet. So I decided to literally go 30 over the speed limit just to get a cop's attention, with the psycho behind me keeping up with me fairly well. Well, thank my lucky stars, there was literally a cop sitting right there. I know I could be called stupid because I could be fined or be arrested for reckless driving, but I honestly think that's worth more than my life because I didn't know if this guy had a weapon or anything on him, and he kept pulling up next to me. So the cop flips his lights on, and obviously when I pass him, the guy just keeps going. Well, I get pulled over, and I explain to the cop everything that's happened, and also exactly why I was going fast. And although he did lecture me, he actually didn't give me a ticket. He told me there was another patrol car just up ahead, so he'll get a word out and possibly get the car pulled over. So we both pulled onto the highway, and he followed me. And the rush of relief when I saw his car being pulled over was amazing. I will forever thank that cop for being so understanding and also not giving me a ticket that day. I guess this lesson shows to always be aware of your surroundings and to always think on your feet. Don't panic, and maybe watch who you're nice to. My whole entire life I've always been told that I'm way too nice to people and that I'll never learn my lesson. Well, after this, I think I've learned plenty. I have no idea what that guy had planned, but one thing's for sure, it was not good. To the guy that followed me for an hour to do God knows what, I really hope you enjoyed my $10. So this isn't my personal story. It's a story my grandpa used to tell at all the family gatherings. So it was the mid-1960s in Atlanta, Georgia. My grandpa was a greaser and a mechanic, and he used to walk the streets of Atlanta late at night just to get away from his home. A little backstory on my grandpa is he was a very hard worker, and he really loved his beer. He was never abusive or anything in that nature, and was all in all a good man. I just wanted to add that bit in there. So one night in 1967, my grandpa had just got off work and decided to walk to a gas station to get a pack of cigarettes and a 6-pack of Milwaukee's Best. Well, he gets into the store and he gets his cigarettes and beer. He then decides that he's going to go through Memorial Park and then sit on a bench and drink his beer and smoke. So as he starts walking towards Memorial Park, he sees 3 guys walking real close together. Note that it was dark and the park was dimly lit. He had to squint to get a better view of exactly what he was seeing, and it was 2 guys dragging their friend. It looked like the guy being dragged had gotten drunk and passed out. Now, what my grandpa meant by drag isn't like they were pulling his body from behind and dragging. Have y'all ever seen the movie Weekend at Bernie's? Well, they were dragging him like that. They had each arm over each of their shoulders. They were both wearing black 1930s looking gangster suits and gray fedoras, and the man that they were dragging was wearing a blue business suit. While my grandpa's watching them, he goes to light a cigarette, and he realizes that he forgot his lighter, and he couldn't light any. So he decides he'll go over and ask the 3 men. While he's on his way to them, they get up to a bench, and they sit their drunken friend on the bench. They then briefly look at my grandpa, and then casually walk away into the night. Now very confused, my grandpa thought that maybe they were going to go back and get their car and then drive it to where the closest gate was to the bench and then pick him up from there. So my grandpa decides that maybe he could wake the guy up and ask him if he's got a lighter, or maybe he has some matches so he can light up his cigarette. As my grandpa approached the slumped over man, he realizes that the man's eyes are wide open and it looked as if he was stargazing. So my grandpa gets right up to him and then says, "Hey man, you got a light?" The man didn't budge, so my grandpa said again, "Hey buddy, you got a lighter that I can use to light up my weed?" Weed is what my grandpa called a cigarette back then. The man didn't move or say anything, so my grandpa stepped a little closer to him, putting his hand up in front of the man's face, waving it side to side, trying to see if the man's eyes would react, but they didn't. So my grandpa put his hand on his shoulder, kind of shaking him a little, and as soon as he did that, the man fell on the ground onto his back, showing 3 bullet holes that went into his chest. After my grandpa saw the bullet holes, he then hightailed it out of the park and went straight home, then locking his doors, just in case he was being followed by the same 2 men from before. My grandpa told me that he never heard any other news about it, and he had never seen anything in the newspaper about it. He said he would have called the police, but back then he was way too afraid that those 2 men would know who would have called the police, and they would have came after him. My grandpa passed away in 2003. He was an honest man, and I really miss him every day. That story is forever stuck with me, and I just thought I would share it. Hey everyone, I hope you all enjoyed these stories. If you ever want to submit your own, you can do so at southerncannibal.com. Have a good night everyone, and remember to always